keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again with your host, Nick Burnaby, here on UCY.TV. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'm glad to be back with you. And I got an awesome panel in the studio with us tonight, and I'm feeling a bit under the weather as of late, so we're going to have a little bit of a roundtable going all show, and we got some news to talk about. First, I'm going to let our roundtable introduce themselves. Manny, why don't you start us off?
Manny Angler from Occupy Los Angeles. Down here, doing the show with Nick and Claire and Dee Dee. And so I'm just glad. I want to send a shout out to those homies down there at the liquor store down the road from Nick's place, and really nice shout out to those people in that Mexican restaurant that are about a half a block from us.
What's up? This is DB, long time co-host, and just watching Nick get sick, so hopefully he's okay. And I guess we'll be talking about not the political process tonight, other things that are more interesting.
There isn't things more interesting than that. I'm Claire Furnish. I'm a writer for Anti-Media, and there is so much going on in the news these days. It should be a pretty interesting show, I would think. We could start out by talking about mainstream media. There's an article up on Anti-Media right now called Mainstream Media Marching U.S. into More War in the Wake of Paris Terrorist Attacks. So just as, and you both might be familiar as well, just as with Iraq and Afghanistan and all sorts of other military interventions, the mainstream media just dives right in and goes with the propaganda and kind of dictates to the American public what it is that we're supposed to feel, who is our enemy and who is not our enemy. So it looks like we are on the march to war indeed. Either of you want to say something about that?
Well, personally, I'm not too crazy about propaganda, which I like to call Yankee propaganda, in saying, oh, these guys are bad, so now we're going to go to war with them and stuff like that. That's why I'm really kind of leery about what happened in France, because all of a sudden this happens in France, now we're going to be bombing Syria and all that, and just, it's like somebody's doing this on purpose just to create wars. Now, a lot of people are saying why the manufacturers are happy. Of course they're happy. They're the ones selling the weapons, so they're going to be happy about that and stuff like that. And, who's next? Mexico?
It's a good question. It seems like there's so much war propaganda going on because there's so much profit to be made. There's also a story up on Anti-Media, I don't know the title right offhand, but talks about how the stock prices for arms manufacturers had a huge leap right after the terror attacks. And granted, those stock prices came back down, but it's rather indicative of what's going on and why we're at war anywhere. It really doesn't have anything to do necessarily with even political grudges. It just has to do with making sure the war machine is turning along and, quote unquote, providing jobs. And as long as we continue to subscribe to, this whole belligerent sort of propaganda policy, then, the profit's going to keep going up and up and up.
And it was really, it's so telling that it came from Paris, the whole terror attacks, because of the G20 summit, the UN climate change summit. One of the big things they were going to be discussing was the infamous cap and trade program. And what a lot of people don't understand is that the empire, the global empire, runs off oil and they run off drugs. So if you start cutting into the oil, if you start telling places like Saudi Arabia that they have to cap their wells, that we can't pull any more fossil fuels out of the ground because it's accelerating climate change and literally we cannot evolve and adapt quick enough, well, then that's where you get this blowback. This is corporate blowback. This people that think this has anything to do with the Syrian conflict, meaning the civil war there between different sects of Islam, it has nothing to do with that. This was just a veiled threat. The assailants now, there's reports saying that they were absolutely Caucasian. So this is from multiple eyewitness accounts. There's no official CCTV camera because those were cut off 48 hours before the attacks. They were hacked. So this is all just a big, basically telling France and every other country that says, if you think you're getting off the petrodollar, aka the cocaine dollar, we're going to fucking kill your civilians. And that's really what it boils down to.
And one of the things that really aggravates me is to completely falsify passports just to blame somebody. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, the details are very shady. But to me, it's less about how it happened, why it happened, and who did it, and like more about what the reaction is going to be, and if this is a legitimate terror attack, what's the goal? It's to bait another country into this massive war, just like 9/11 did, and it brought all these countries in, and the terror industry has been thriving ever since.
I mean, ISIS has a Twitter account, and they have a stock symbol, and they're headquartered in New York City. I mean, they're a mercenary army. They're not following an ideology. They're following the petrodollar, and they're going to protect it because they're millionaires in their own right, and they're protecting their own little, well, let's face it, they want a caliphate. They want to take everything from the Tigris to the Euphrates, condense it, and leave the rest for the Persian Empire, a.k.a. Iran. So that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing Saudi Arabia's sphere of influence with Israel as the lapdog, and they're dividing the Middle East, and that's what this whole conflict is all about.
And also, it really is the same sort of buildup as after 9/11. We have to vilify some sort of state or group in order to make sure that the American public is sufficiently propagandized to believe that we do, in fact, have enemies and that they hate us for, any number of reasons, ostensibly our freedom, but, whatever, come on. They hate us because we're bombing them repeatedly.
We also have Jake Anderson on the line tonight, and he wrote pretty extensively about what's been going on in Paris, and one of the side effects that we've already seen is this militarized reaction. I mean, 10,000 troops throughout the streets of France? Jake, what can you tell us about that, dude?
Yeah, it's pretty, by the way, hi everyone, good to be here, and sorry to hear you're under the weather, Nick, but at least you have the warmth of friendship and wisdom at your side with...
there you go, Jake.
and Manny, but yeah, they're pretty much in a state of martial law. I mean, it's not... I don't think it's absolute, but they've amended a law, state of emergency law from like the 50s. It was originally used in the Algerian conflict, and the most recent use of it was anti-police brutality riots in 2006. But yeah, they're basically, the police have the ability to search and seizure without any kind of warrant. They can lock down entire neighborhoods. They can literally stop Parisians, or probably anyone in France actually, from convening at a meeting hall or in a theater. I mean, they have almost total impunity to do whatever the state wants at this point. It's pretty scary. It's definitely an echo of post 9/11 America that we're seeing now in the European sphere.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's almost like the same thing is happening to them, and it seems to me after watching the news reports and such that the U.S. is really going to just kind of fall right in line with France, because now that everybody's outraged because it's France and not, say, Nigeria, then, we have a reason for war, because those are our French allies, despite the fact that everybody was, pissed off because after 9/11 they made freedom fries because they didn't, they were upset with France. I mean, it's just bizarre. You just take one context and place it in different scenarios, and it's the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, but what a lot of people don't understand, though, is France has been a historical partner and ally of the American people, which, if you've been paying attention at all, the exact same corporate dick faces that pretty much lost in 1776 are back in control, and those people hate France because France is a true republic. If you go over to France, they don't have two political parties, they have 15. That's what a republic is. That's why maybe people laugh and say things don't get done in France, you have to pay a lot of taxes. I don't see anybody immigrating out of France over here. I don't see anybody complaining about their free healthcare, childcare, college, and even a stipend for groceries. I mean, the thing is, the people that want the new world order or disorder and the order that'll come out of that chaos, they hate France and they hate everything it stands for.
One thing about France that I'm really not particularly crazy about is that they're still collecting all these fees from these African countries. I mean, that is just...
But, the French are just as complicit for the most part in the same sort of operations that we have going on. I mean, we have our quote unquote Western allies, and they're willing to follow like our narrative and everything. And this is a chance, I think, for the U.S. government to kind of take advantage of the French going through something to institute the same policies that we would have, if not worse, if it had happened here. So I see a lot of, the same scenarios are being set up in the media. Everybody's, pounding on the drums of war, and here we go. Yet again.
What's particularly disturbing is, of course, that these attacks hit a somewhat young progressive area of France, not areas associated with state apparatus or tourism or anything like that. This was a very strategic move to attempt to militarize, at least ideologically, a progressive, young progressive part of France. And, I said for about a decade after 9/11, I said that I believe the next major terrorist attack in America would be something like an attack on San Francisco or even, something like Portland. But if you can get the extreme kind of progressive area of a state to pow in fear to terrorism, then they've accomplished what they really want, which according to Dan Sanchez in an article he wrote, is to eliminate the gray zone, which is the area of kind of neutral ideology, and that's not black and white, that's not absolutist. And by eliminating that gray zone, they can turn the world in this black and white absolutist hell. And I think that's what we're seeing now, is by slow degrees, we're seeing this march towards extremism in every form. It's really, really scary, but strategically done.
It's turning dissent into consent for the wrong action. That's essentially what it's doing. It's like people, we see it now where you're having people like attack the independent media who are so-called leftists or liberals or far left, saying that they're pro-war, saying that they're pro the American empire. Well, then you're not a liberal. You're not a classic liberal if you're pro-war. You're just not. And they're changing these ideologies and these definitions and basically turning people into something that they don't think they are, but now they are.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do, man. You know, these guys are really good at that propaganda. I want to go back to something DV was saying about France, and yeah, they do have a bunch of these like social safety nets and things like that. And you don't see that much immigration out, and same with in the U.S. But we got to remember, France is an old empire, man. You know, they've been going at it for a long time. They recently helped overthrow Libya. They recently had a major incursion in Mali and other places in Africa. I mean, they've been pillaging that place, and you know, a lot of the stuff that they give out, the free education, all this stuff, it's blood money too.
Right.
You know,
Right.
And I think that, you know, the French are kind of furthering the same sort of policies that we are instituting with surveillance and such, because I've seen it rumored around media that this is arguably the time right when the ultimate outcome of the French Revolution has started to take place. So just when the people are perhaps at their height of power, so to say, you know, the government comes in and has to crack down. You know, you see this terror attack and suddenly everybody's more than willing to give up any sort of sense of privacy and, you know, from the government, from spying right when it's convenient, because, you know, now's the opportunity. And I think we see the same things happening to the French people that we went through, and I'm not sure that, you know, it seems like for the most part they're falling right for it like the American people did.
and going back to the U.S. here, the U.S. has not really wasted any time in capitalizing on this tragedy, you know, and as we were talking about at the very beginning of the show here, I mean, they're using this attack on France to like build more and more of this American intervention idea. Media is leading the way, a bunch of politicians. One thing I want to talk to Manny about here is maybe the backlash that immigrants are going to get. You know, I was reading a story earlier today about a guy who was an Uber driver in the U.S. and he was I think he was an Ethiopian Christian guy, but his passenger thought he was Muslim and literally assaulted him because of it, man.
Exactly.
And actually, you know, that's true. There was a report, I can't remember, I think it might have been Michigan, of a Muslim woman. I can't remember what country she was from, but somebody just came up to her and started provoking her, and she ended up being beaten and had to go to the hospital, and now there's a GoFundMe for her, you know, just because she was wearing hijab. And, you know, it's as if there is no longer any tolerance for anything, and this is the perfect atmosphere for the government to go in and build up war. Just when, you know, we're at the height of paranoia, xenophobia, here we go.
Exactly, Claire. And one of the things that I saw that was really, just blew me away, actually, to say the least, was this guy at this restaurant left, basically a message and saying a tip only for somebody that's a U.S. citizen. I mean, that's hateful.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean,
that's terrible story, dude. That's horrible.
It is. It's ridiculous, man. It really is ridiculous. We have our first caller of the night from a 407 area code. How's it going? You're on the Outside Media. What do you want to talk about?
Yes. My name is Steven, and I've done some research into your program and listened to some archives, and I really respect what y'all are doing over there.
Awesome, man. Thank you for calling in. What do you want to talk about tonight?
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about this situation in Syria, but I do want to refer to, I think, yesterday's show when one of the commentators there made a statement that Vladimir Putin has the $70 billion in monetary wealth, and I don't know which one of y'all. I really don't know y'all's names yet to recognize who said it, but I would just caution, and I like what y'all say about your disclaimer. You know, don't take my word for anything I say. You know, research it. You know, this $70 billion claim is part of a propaganda campaign to discredit Vladimir Putin. And I've researched it. I found no evidence of it, except for people whose agenda is to, just hate on Putin and, defame Russia and so forth. But I wanted to talk about Syria because I think that I'm very, very concerned about the situation over there. I've been doing some deep research into it after I met a Syrian family here in the United States, and I just inquired into what their thoughts were on the situation, and they totally support the government of Syria. They're from Damascus, and as I've done research, what I found from the left, the progressive left, and to the right, there's a huge information blackout with information having to do with Syria. And this also goes into when you do Google searches about intellectuals that are featured on major media and they write books. You do Google searches, you go to 9 pages, and you find no dissent, nobody saying this guy's full of crap, right? Wow, this is like, we're in the middle of a very, very much an information war. The depth of which I've never seen, and I'm 51, the depth of which I've never seen in this society in my entire life. The blackout about what actually is going on in Syria. And we don't have people that claim to be for fair shake for people, against dictatorship, against imperialism. What I found something very common is that people just don't have a clear, concise narration for exactly what has been going on there for over the course of 5 years. And what's going on there is this. United States, France, Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and other players
Israel
have been sending mercenary jackal armies in there to terrorize the populations, take over territory. Al-Nusra, and there's a bunch of different groups that go by different names, but huge amounts of mercenary armies are going into towns, terrorizing people. And then you have the ISIS phenomena, which the United States uses ISIL in the hinterland, but it lets ISIL grow and does not destroy ISIL because their major goal is to overthrow the government of Syria. And we just, in the United States, we do not get clear narrations of exactly what is going on. This is a non-sectarian government. In other words, it is a multi-faith constitution where there's Sunnis that are majority. Sunnis are the majority of the army. Sunnis are the majority of the administration of Bashar al-Assad. And we get massive lies, propaganda, and then the people living in Syria get jackal terrorists that rape, murder, behead, kill, and terrorize day after day. And we do not have anything near honest discussions about what is going on in Syria, even with the so-called.
Damn, I think we accidentally lost that caller there. But he was
making a good one.
Yeah, he was making some great points. I kind of want to elaborate there because the Syrian conflict is extremely, extremely complex. There's no real clear way to
there's many agendas.
Frame it. You know what I mean?
There's different narratives.
To get down to the root of the Assad government, it's a secular dictatorship, right? It's a dictatorship.
And it's
a
minority
dictatorship
because it's the Alawites too. So it's 10% of the population. They're an offshoot. They're kind of like Wahhabism or something closer to that. Where I'm trying to think of what a good analogy would be for Christians. Maybe like the Mormons. Like if you could imagine the Mormons running the entire U.S. Well, most people are going to be like, those crazy freaking Mormons, I don't want to live under their particular interpretation of the Bible. Well, it's the same thing with the Alawite sect and how they pretty much consider many people that are mainstream Muslim to be apostates for the most part and a little bit beneath them because they don't follow the Quran correctly. And that's basically the problem with religion everywhere. It's not the fact of worship and belief, it's that you're doing it the wrong way, so you deserve to die for that.
It seems like that's the case almost anywhere you go. You know, if somebody does not believe or agree with your particular ideology, there's all sorts of fighting, and the person has to be labeled an enemy. But you know, that's just buying into the narrative, because governments and their propaganda are notorious for actually just inciting division wherever it's possible to incite it. And that's where we lose track of the fact that we're all humans. We're all like commoners in a way against this kind of elitist majority or minority that rules over everybody with like a corporate thumb.
Yep.
And that's the kind of the death of the gray zone again. It's the end of pluralist thought is the idea that your ideology is absolutely correct, and anyone who's not playing into that is at a weakness, or it deserves to be discriminated against in some way. And it's kind of the death of pluralism in this culture. We're starting to really see the full effects of it, which is that even if we repaired the government at this point, even if we put corporations in their place, we still have a population that is, I don't know, permanently screwed in the head. I mean, there's like, our population is afraid and hates foreigners, and it's just like, this sickness of government has now passed along to the people, and we're representing it, unfortunately, in a very sad way.
Well, I think also that we can't really downplay the importance of the TPP here, because this is also lead up to allowing. If it looks like a free trade deal, it must be, and we'll buy into all that xenophobia and stuff just to make sure that we have this wonderful trade deal in place.
Right, and when there's partisan, or when there's bipartisan agreement on something, that a particularly larger than life evil is being pushed through, and we're definitely going to see that with the TPP. Good point, bringing that up.
One of the things that really is always on my mind is that if the United States ever went to war with Mexico, I feel like, I would feel like the Japanese, they rounded up even the Japanese that were born in this country, that I'm a U.S. citizen, they would round me up and just basically do the same thing. And that's kind of sad when I think about it.
And they did worse than that when there was the Mexican-American War. It was just a pure slaughter. And a lot of people aren't really hitting street buffs, but we killed our way down to Mexico City. I mean, I don't know what percentage of the population was, but I've heard it was upwards of like 4 or 5 million people that died during that war, and it's kind of a forgotten war, and not a lot of people know about it, but it really was the very beginning and earnest of Manifest Destiny, which we continue, and like we talk about every week, we continue that to this day. It's what the Middle East is about. It is the control and propagation of resources at all costs for the empire.
Yeah, man, interesting points there. I just want to go back to ISIS here, because as the caller was talking about, I think ISIS initially was a kind of like a convenient byproduct of policies going on by the U.S. and NATO and stuff. But at this moment in time, I don't think that ISIS is being controlled by the CIA or the U.S. government. I think that they kind of expected it to happen. And they encouraged it at first, but now it's got way out of control, and it's just another one of those times where the U.S. government tries to do something and it backfires, and it's something we see over and over again.
But it's also, it has accomplished what one of the major goals of the infamous Albert Pike was, which was that World War III would be Islam versus the world, and that's what they want to set up. They understand that there's only one culture and a religion that's as polarizing as Islam in the Middle East, and that if they can get everyone to gang up, give up all their rights, and go to war to crush the last real dissidents against this global corporatocracy. If you go to the Middle East, you'll notice one real thing that's lacking. There's really no big banks, and if there are, they're state-owned. That's because that they consider usury a sin. In other words, putting percentage on profit for loaning money. And you have to understand that the New World Order is anything, if they're not anything, they're a giant banking scheme and a giant, Ponzi scheme. And the Middle East just doesn't want to buy into it, not the typical man down there, so they have to eliminate their last linchpin of resistance.
Interesting point, man. And they also have a lot of the resources, a lot of the oil and all that.
Exactly.
So yeah, that is a very interesting point here. I want to shift away a little bit from the whole terrorism thing because it's so saturated nowadays that it's just like, God, man. I mean, how much more of it can we take? You know what I mean?
Sad commentary right there.
We got another thing that has been big for the all year and last year as well is police brutality. I think as of Monday it was police in the United States killed 1,000 people this year of Monday.
That's not including Border Patrol, though, right?
I think that's only strictly cops.
So that's okay.
And that's like 3 people a day, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous, you know. And I mean, how many more times do we have to see it?
Unfortunately, it seems like we're going to have to see it a whole lot more times. Nothing is changing, and with Paris having happened, people are willing to accept more control by the state. They're probably going to make even more excuses for police brutality because we've got to trust our government. We're doing the right thing, of course, right?
That's what they tell us.
They do.
And so I want to bring to the panel here a question, and this is something that people are always asking, and I think a lot of people have different opinions on it. How do we stop police brutality? First, I'll go to Manny, and then we'll go around the table here.
Well, as an activist, I think the best way to do it is to actually sit down with the whole system and basically discussing that number one, we have to admit that there's a problem to begin with, which cops haven't admitted that, they think they're doing the right thing, and so that would be a start and stuff like that. But we can't just blame the cops. The system is all corrupt, so we need to completely look at the roots of the system, sit down and look at the whole picture, and then do something about what the cops are doing, including Border Patrol, by the way.
DB?
Well, I mean, I like to go off topic here because we need to get to the root cause, and the root cause is really simply the economic inequality is just absolutely staggering. In a poor country, in a country with lacking of resources, there'll be crime, and honestly, the people will deal with it very harshly. If you go to Brazil and someone's caught stealing, the mob will beat them to death.
Yeah,
it will happen. So, is police brutality, endemic to so-called first world countries with a plethora of resources, but horribly unequal division? That's true. I mean, if you go to a country where you have the social safety net, like a UK where they can disarm their cops, or Australia, you can change to that system. We know the oligarchs in the United States are not going to change to that system. And I just want to give people listening, a brief history lesson of how police brutality could be stifled in the U.S., but we have to actually learn about what's kind of been denied to us. There was a guy named Lee Wanta. I don't know if anybody really knows who he is. He was basically working under Reagan. And by the way, I have my own theories about Reagan. I think he was killed and a double got put in. But that's besides the point. That's besides the point. Lee Wanta worked for Reagan, and he was going to be basically taking all of the profits that had been pulled out of the United States economy by the military junta during and after World War II. Because as most people know, the United States, 50% of the GDP goes to the military on any given year, and we only have roughly 1% of the population. So people, if you're mad at Wall Street, you're mad at the wrong people, because they're nothing without the military. But let me just tell you what Lee Wanta wanted to do. Lee Wanta basically used Wall Street as the weapon that it is and took down the Soviet Union. He crushed them economically. And what he came up with was a surplus somewhere in the range of, I don't even know the figures, but it's north of $9 trillion. If you came up with that cash injection into the U.S. economy, following Bernie Sanders' basically new project, which is going to be like a New Deal, rebuild our infrastructure and spread that wealth out, because it's sitting right now in CIA bank accounts and they're using it for all kinds of heinous shit. That would get rid of police brutality. Police brutality is there because of our economic inequality is disgusting here. That's really what it is. You have very, very desperate people who are having trouble getting a job, getting an education, and getting food, watching these billionaires fly their private G6s around, and we have all the money and the resources in the world, and none of it's coming down.
Yeah, man, I think you're right on the economic side of things. I think the problem is that there's so many different various economic schools of thought out there that it would I don't think that Bernie Sanders or any of these, whether we're talking about Bernie or a more libertarian leaning economic system, it'd be hard for like anyone to accept it wide scale, in the U.S.
Unless the money was there.
Yeah, and the problem in the U.S., like you said, is that we're being jacked, by this
We're not broke.
corporate system,
No.
and it leads to all this poverty and people having to steal and problem, reaction solution. You get there's thieves out, so they have a bunch of cops and this, that, and the other, and we end up in the situation we have right now.
Yeah, we definitely do. And actually, there are ways, I think, that we could institute some fairly serious reform with police brutality. There's, of course, the issue of body cams. And yes, they're not only controversial, but, there are a lot of different issues out there. And it's not just a matter of, throw a body camera on a cop and hope he keeps it on. There are actually some policies in place. In Seattle, for one, they have a system where the police wear their body cameras all the time, and when it comes to issues of privacy for victims or whatever who they go to interview, what happens is the tape automatically loads up to YouTube in a kind of redacted version, so you can see what is happening fairly clearly, but you can't necessarily discern people's identities. So that keeps the privacy issue in place and allows the actual body camera accountability footage to keep rolling and be in place. I think the other option for solving police brutality that is not talked about very much is that if we take away the militarized training, because police now essentially receive military boot camp training, so if we take that model and do away with it, it's proven wrong, and put police back in a classroom, as bad as that sounds, you put the police in a classroom when they're in training, and they learn about different groups and how to be empathetic and how to use de-escalation techniques and such, it's proven more effective. But it's not used. I think 90% of the police in America are now trained just like the military, and that really says it all.
And who trains them? I think people need to, exactly. Israeli private contractors train the United States police. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's obvious that they're being very well schooled in oppression, and they're just continuing to clamp. I mean, do we want to live in Gaza? Do you want the United States to be Gaza? No. Because that's what they want to set up.
And there's a lot of resistance. There was a story we covered on the anti-media this week regarding at the LAPD they're trying to make like some kind of award system to reward cops that peacefully solve conflicts. And the local police union was like,
that puts them at risk.
They were like, hell no, we're not going to support that shit. We don't, we want to allow these guys to shoot to kill.
Yeah.
And the UK is kind of shifting in that direction as they push more and more towards this like really Orwellian society over there in England. There was a story we covered as well today on the anti-media about Jeremy Corbyn, and he's very much like, I wouldn't call him the Bernie Sanders of England, but he's like way better than Bernie Sanders. I mean, Anyway, he criticized this new policy that they're trying to push through in England, where they're trying to allow the cops to shoot to kill, and literally the media and all the politicians just went off on him and talked all this crap about him, and so like people that are trying to talk common sense, that have like a political voice or have a lot of influence, they get battered down by these by the establishment.
Yeah, what better way to kind of reinforce exactly what the state wants you to believe by, calling somebody who seems to have some common sense. If you call him an effing disgrace and basically discredit him as being insane, then no matter how sane his idea is, people are going to believe it. And that's how they subvert kind of the public information. That's one method of propaganda, is smear the opposition that actually might do some good.
Yeah, that's true. And this is exactly what they do, and that's why we see Hillary Clinton winning in the polls, and it's these old ideas that are so heavily supported that reinforce the establishment that are kind of parroted by the media and picked up and carried. And
all you have to know is Nazi sympathizers run the government, and they were infiltrated by Operation Paperclip. So if you want to know what's going on, we are a rogue nation. I mean, at least our government is.
And for all our listeners, just remember, vote for my candidate, nobody.
Or how about these nuts? I mean,
yeah, I mean, shit. The U.S. has gone rogue a long time ago, man. And, you know, who knows who knows the influence? There's all kinds of different influences there. I think they picked up a bunch of tactics from all over the place, and it's you know, it's something that we need to look at from the activist point of view, is learning from history and reading these signs and seeing this slow creep take over. You know, and ever since the you know, I think it was last week or the week before, where one of the federal courts ruled that parts of the NSA's bulk data collection was illegal.
yeah.
And ever since the whole Paris attack, that, you know, you got all these guys coming on the media blaming it on Snowden and saying, well, if it weren't for Snowden, this would have never happened in Paris and stuff. And it's like,
Well, they outsourced they outsourced it basically to private companies. If anybody's wondering why, you know, the judge did what he did and they're saying he's a hero, yeah, he's a hero to the NSA, because now the NSA has no more accountability for their bulk data collection. That's now on AT&T and Verizon and all these other corporate idiots who are going to hand over all your information anyway, court order or not, because they're subsidized wholly by the federal government. We were talking about this earlier, Nick, about how mainstream media, except for maybe Fox, don't pull profits. McDonald's does not pull a profit. Look at any Fortune 500 company, they do not pull profits. They're all subsidized, and they're all part of the agenda. They really are.
They're making money off investments too. I mean, it's, you know, it's not just a straight this, that, or the other thing, but it's also interwoven and interconnected. Definitely. I mean, you have government kind of working with corporations to make sure the corporate interests are protected with Occupy Wall Street, which, you know, they activated an incredibly aggressive tactic against Occupy Wall Street that ended in utter disaster, but it was all by design. Yeah. You know, they had police and corporations working together to spy on activists ahead of time, to spy on them during the time, to watch social media, to make sure that, you know, it's like we must crack down on dissent, because they realize that the government is actually starting to lose some ground and some credibility with the people. If they don't crack down on dissent now, it could be too late for them.
Exactly, Claire. You know. Yeah. So, Nick, what's going on in Spain?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, a few things are actually going on in Spain. The first thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was that they issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. So that's pretty interesting. Claire wrote a story on that, and it goes back to this 2010 raid on this kind of a humanitarian mission that was going in to try to provide relief to the people down in the Gaza Strip, and Israeli commandos basically boarded the ship and shot a bunch of people and shut the whole thing down.
Yeah, there was the Freedom Flotilla, the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. Actually, the point of this humanitarian mission, there were, I believe, 6 ships involved with like almost 500 people. Ooh. All they were doing was delivering humanitarian aid, including construction materials and, you know, just some basic needs that the people of Gaza don't really have access to anymore, because they're cut off completely by, you know, Israel's wall and blockade and completely absurdly terroristic tactics. So this humanitarian effort comes in, tries to go by sea to deliver these supplies, and while they're in international waters, these Israeli commandos, likely IDF, board the ship and basically start shooting. And there were 9 people killed immediately, and then one activist was in a coma for 4 years and then recently died. But, you know, it's more or less proven that there was no provocation whatsoever. They found no medical evidence on any of these officers to substantiate their claims that they had been attacked by these activists, considering that they were the ones that boarded the boat and started shooting. There was an 18-year-old on board who died with, he was shot, I believe, 5 times, once in the face while he was lying on his back. And I do believe that pretty much says it all. So Spain has decided, you know, this judge in Spain decided that if Netanyahu and 6 other of his cohorts ever set foot on the ground, he said, make sure the police and the civil guard tell me because he is under arrest. Because these are, crimes against humanity. These are war crimes. The International Criminal Court also agreed. They found these to be, substantially likely war crimes, and they can't get away with it. And yet they've gotten away with it before. And there was another Freedom Flotilla, I believe it was earlier this year, and it didn't end in bloodshed, but it was almost just as violently taken over, and the people were taken back to shore and arrested, and given the rigmarole. In my opinion, that's what happens when you have an active terrorist state who's allowed to do what it wants to.
They get impunity because they're such a close U.S. ally. It seems, and the UN has condemned Israel's actions multiple times, and it just seems like they just keep getting to do whatever they want. We keep sending them money. They keep getting a bunch of weapons. They're a nuclear power, and that may also play a part of it and all that.
Plus, they're direct. I mean, if you do any deep research into it, you'll see that the NSA directly allows their servers to pipe into Tel Aviv. I mean, everything that all of our security apparatus collects on a daily basis worldwide, it goes to Tel Aviv. So they have us by the balls. I'm sure they've blackmailed us for the last 50 plus years. Probably since 67, they've been able to infiltrate us and blackmail us. And yeah, I mean, if anything, they wag our tail, and then Saudi Arabia really tells us what to do. And we have 2 foreign masters, maybe 3, maybe the UK too, with the banking complex the way it is. But yeah, I mean, we're fighting other countries' wars. That's all you have to understand. We have never gone into a war since World War II that was in our own interests. Even Vietnam was there to wipe up France's fucking stupid debacle with their ex-colony. So you have to understand, like, every American death since 45 has all been for vain and for nothing.
Exactly. One of the things that the United States has done is they cut down on giving Mexico maybe a couple million less, for the next year. Whoopie-doo. 2 million. Give me a fucking break.
Another thing going on in Spain is there's this Catalonian independence movement, which is kind of an interesting topic, and it really does seem like a secessionist movement that's building over in Europe. And Europe's plagued by a bunch of issues right now, whether economic, social, the refugee crisis, xenophobia. There's a bunch of undercurrents going on in Europe, but there definitely is, and we saw it recently with the whole Scottish independence thing that supposedly failed in the polls and stuff. But we're seeing it now in Spain with this Catalonia independence movement. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think, for one thing, anytime a group actually manages to have enough solidarity to kind of move against the government that's lording over it, I have to applaud them. I really believe that whatever group wants to be should be able to be self-governing, and considering Spain has really cracked down on dissent, like protest is illegal, and among other things, it's really bad over there. I mean, we're looking at the controls coming down in France and in the U.S., but in Spain, they've really cracked the whip, and it's a really tough situation. So,
and it's all because of Pinochet. He never lost.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
He never lost. So imagine if the Nazi regime, they weren't the Nazis, but let's say the regime, a fascist regime never lost the war. They were actually untouched. I mean, this is what happens, man. You have to crack down on dissent. I mean, this is the land of the freaking Inquisition. So that's all you have to know about Spain and understand about Spain.
Exactly. And I'm all for it when a country goes bad, that other places want to independent themselves. One example is the Basque. The Basque have their own flag. So.
There's actually examples all over the place of groups that sort of stand independent of the government that's supposed to be in charge of them. I mean, even, I don't know. It just seems like there are groups all over the place in the world, and it's happening more and more these days. If you watch the tone of the world governments, they seem to be cracking down in general, and it's because the people are fed up. They have no choice but to crack down. If they don't crack down, then, they might be deposed all over the world, and we can't have that.
That's true.
Hung from the rafters.
Exactly, Claire.
Yeah, it's to me it just shows this rising tide of autonomous fervor, and it's going on all over. I think it's been a long time. We've been governed over by central governments for a long time, and I think people are getting tired of it.
Ruled over. Because I still think we're really in a monarchy of sorts. I mean, the richest people in the world have no names and no faces, and you don't know who's really pulling the strings of all these figureheads. We're in a we really are still in a monarchy, a global monarchy. I mean, I don't think people realize that. They think we're free, but you're really not free. The minute you do something to, upset the apple cart and, start competing with the status quo like BRICS, then it leads to conflict and millions die. And I think we have to understand, like, going forward as a human race, that if we're going to compete, if we're going to pretend that we still need to fight for resources and we're not post-scarcity, we will have World War III. If we can all understand that Tesla's made energy obsolete for 130 years and that we can grow enough food for 12 billion people, maybe we won't have that World War III. Maybe we can unshackle ourselves finally.
DB, to that point,
and well.
if you tie that in back to the police question, I'd like to proffer a solution, which is, I don't know, maybe dose the water supply with really good LSD.
Why not E?
Our final hope,
Right.
a new hope.
All right, brave new worlder.
Hey, man.
Hey, Huxley just got a hard-on in his grave.
God, if only I could see that.
Oh, you guys are gonna make me choke, man. Oh, I need another.
No, but yeah, you're right. We're seeing the confluence of 1984 and Brave New World in a way that we probably could have never imagined. Just this idea of a perpetual enemy. The enemy, the war never ends because the war's not supposed to end. We're not supposed to win the war. The purpose of the war is persistence, a persistent war.
Ain't that the truth?
And what got us into a lot of these wars that we're in right now was 9/11, and unfortunately we're seeing kind of a repeat of that with France. But Jake, we posted an article from you today about 9/11, and a former head of the CIA, George Tenet, had some pretty interesting perspective. He was around during the Bush years, pre 9/11 and during it. And he had some interesting things to say. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, most everyone probably at this point already knows about kind of the warnings that Bush and Cheney got and Condoleezza Rice got regarding what was basically a pretty widespread terrorist mobilization at the time. But Tenet is now kind of exposing how it was actually way more vast than we thought, a deeper timeline than we thought, going back to even May. And essentially, what Tenet says is that the CIA actually presented a plan to Bush and Cheney called the blue. It was the Blue Sky Paper, and what they wanted to do was essentially infiltrate Afghanistan, and what he says is they wanted to build a bridge to Uzbekistan. I think that was the country he named. And not only did they just completely ignore these warnings, but he actually says that they may have actually attempted to hide the paper trail. And I mean, I don't know if it's just complete willful ignorance or it's he even says at one point it's incomprehensible, but something really rotten in the state of Denmark was going on in the U.S. At that time, and there's a lot of theories out there about kind of a if there was a kind of a national.
Delaware? Are you saying?
What's that?
You said Denmark. You talking about Delaware?
No, I was making a Shakespearean reference actually from from Hamlet. Yeah, not Delaware. Something rotten in the state of Delaware. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I don't know, but basically, it's without a doubt now that they knew something was happening, and they knew an attack was going to come, and they didn't do anything. And so the next logical question is why.
Is this why George Sr.'s calling Dick Cheney an iron ass and all this other shit?
Yeah, I think that plays in. I mean, there's definitely a kind of a trump cards being played in the neoconservative wing and trying to save face. Maybe Tenet's a dick too. Like I don't really I don't care about Tenet at all. I mean, he's George Tenet is no one to be holding up on a pedestal, but at least he had the temerity to come out and openly question, why the warnings weren't heeded. And here we are, terrified of terrorism, and then they have a chance to do something about it and didn't. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe the conspiracies are right. Maybe they saw it as an opportunity for geopolitical advantage and used it, played it.
Well, when you have a military-industrial complex controlling not only this country but most of the world, and you have no one left to fight,
right?
You have to manufacture an endless war of dissidents and rebels and insurgents, and that's what they've done.
Yeah, they propped up these groups. The funding of these groups is now very, very well established, and I think sometimes the motive is in they say the devil is in the details. The motive is almost in between. It's almost like when something's unspoken, when two people with enormous power don't need to actually say something out loud. They just the transfer of information is almost unspoken. I almost feel like it's going on at a very high level of facilitating these terror groups, knowing that it's going to benefit the whole deep state, the corporatocracy, the national security agencies. It's all tied together, and it's starting to get so transparent at this point that it's not even really a conspiracy theory anymore. They knew it was going to happen. The goddamn former CIA director basically came out and said they knew it was going to happen, and they concealed the intelligence of it so that people wouldn't know that they knew. I mean, how much more explicit do we need to get?
Yeah, it really is pretty illuminating. Anyone wanting to read up on that article, it's pretty in-depth. It's called Ex-CIA Chief Bush and Cheney knew 9/11 was imminent concealed intelligence. But, it really does just present us with even more questions than it does answers, once again, because this whole 9/11 thing is riddled with just questions and so many conspiracy theories and stuff. I don't come from a school of thought that believes in most of these conspiracy theories, but there's definitely a lot of untold things that have gone on to this day that we still don't know about, including... and mainly Saudi funding for the terrorists that did it, and that's something that is very much borderline mainstream information at this point. And these are questions that we need to ask, and that's one of the other things that this British politician was talking about on Monday. Because not only was he criticizing England's new shoot-to-kill order, but he was also talking about, well, how the hell is ISIS getting their weapons? And we know that it's coming from Saudi Arabia. And who sells the weapons to Saudi Arabia? Well, we just signed a multi-billion-dollar deal to sell them weapons. And so indirectly, weapons are still flowing from the United States to ISIS. And as I said earlier, I don't think that they're under direct control by the CIA or anything like that. But indirectly, we're still giving weapons to them.
And American journalist Serena Shim was actually killed in the border region of Syria because supposedly, although her evidence seemed to have been taken, she found evidence that ISIS and other groups like ISIS were receiving weapons across the border through supposedly UN vehicles and allied vehicles and such. There's a reason she's not here to tell us about that story.
Yeah, and she died, and it was one of those American journalists that got zero media attention.
Yep.
I guess it's one of those things where there's just a lot of questions out there, and I guess we just got to keep digging.
Always.
And when it comes down to it, there's a bunch of stuff going on overseas being led by NATO and, the U.S. and other Western actors that are bad things. The Paris attack is kind of small compared to the things that are going on. We don't want to downplay that too much, but 300,000 dead in Syria.
We can't ignore all the victims in the world.
And something's got to be done to stop all this stuff. I think people need to get more organized and have their voices heard. We've got the internet for now. While it's still free, let's do this. How's the time? That's the end of the show. Thank you all for tuning in.
Yo, here we go through the stereo.
Back on Monday. Peace out.